Hey guys, Brian Castro with Better Chess Training. I would like to share a beautiful game with you today, and it is with the white pieces Mikhail Botvinnik, the fifth world champion, against Jose Raul Capablanca, who we've seen on this channel before, the third world champion. This game was played in 1938 at the Great AVRO tournament in the Netherlands. Now, at this point, Capablanca was no longer world champion, and Botvinnik wasn't the world champion yet. But Capablanca is no slouch. At this point, he's still a very dangerous opponent, and this game by Botvinnik, Botvinnik called it the game of his life, and we'll see why here. The game starts out with d4. Botvinnik was known as a positional strategic player, so d4 was favored by him. Knight to f6 was played by Capablanca. c4, e6, knight c3, all standard stuff. And here this could have transposed to a queen's gambit with d5, but instead Capablanca played the Nimzo Indian with bishop to b4. And the general idea here is that by pinning this knight, the later move d5 could be made more effective. And there's a lot of strategic nuances that we won't be able to go into too much with this video, but we will see what happens in this particular game. White played e3, which is one of the two most popular moves against the Nimzo Indian. Let me just step back a moment just to show you. Queen to c2 is known as the classical variation, and Capablanca played it quite often himself. And one of the main lines goes castles, a3, putting the question to this bishop. Bishop takes c3 check, queen takes c3, knight to e4, attacking the queen, and then queen to c2. So with queen to c2, going back to this position, white does not damage his pawn structure like we'll see in this game. So that's one strategic choice, and queen c2 is the second most popular move in this line. And the third most popular, which is not quite as common but still played quite a bit, is knight to f3. And one line could go d5, and if c takes d5, e takes d5, this kind of transposes into a variation of the queen's gambit decline with bishop to g5, knight b to d7, and queen's gambit players will be familiar with this type of setup, e3 and c5, bishop to d3. And this particular position transposes to the Rogozin defense of the queen's gambit declined. Okay, let's go back to the game. Just wanted to show you some of the ways that this opening can go. Okay, after e3, so the idea behind e3 is that we are strengthening our center, but we're eventually going to plan e3 opens up this bishop, which will eventually go to d3, and then white has plans of f3 and eventually pushing in the center with e3 to e4. So that's one of the ideas behind e3. Black responds with d5, striking back here. And white often plays here a3, which basically is trying to relieve this pin and basically trying to force this bishop to decide what it's going to do. It could retreat back to bishop to e7, which is more of a queen's gambit declined setup. But more often, if you're going to play the Nimzo Indian, you are going to take on c3. So bishop takes c3 check, and b takes c3. Okay, let's pause at this position. We can see here what has happened. Black has exchanged one of his bishops, giving white the two bishops. And in exchange for this, he has slightly damaged white's pawn structure. White would wager in this position that although his pawns are doubled here, they actually help to control the central squares a little more, with a little more reinforcement here of d4 and a little more flexibility here with this pawn, which even if it were exchanged on d5, for example, white at some point could even advance this pawn. So this position, this is kind of the idea behind all of the openings in general, is that both sides have their ideas of what is better than, what compensation they get for different elements and imbalances in the position. So when you're looking at your openings, try to understand the ideas with regard to what each side is trying to achieve. Okay, let's keep going here. Black counters in the center with c5, and this is the main pawn lever in many queen's pawn openings. And white exchanges here. C takes d5, e takes d5, and here you might want to just note that we can isolate d pawn here. Sometimes out of the Nimzo-Indian, there are isolated d pawn positions. In this particular position, it wouldn't be great because white's c pawn is also isolated, but just wanted to make you aware of that. Also, black takes back with the king's pawn, the e pawn. If he takes back with the knight, he basically is giving up some of these central squares and making it a lot easier for white to advance with e4 at some point. Okay, so let's keep going. After e takes d5, bishop to d3, moving this bishop to the diagonal, this powerful diagonal here. And just a quick note here, this is an important move to play because black might want to shut off this with c4, which may or may not be a great move, but bishop to d3 is definitely a good move here. Castles, and then knight to e2. And the idea behind knight to e2 is that eventually this knight's going to go to g3 and help to support this e4 advance. So that's the main idea behind white's play, is to break through here with e4 and control the center. Okay, black plays b6, and one of these ideas, it basically gives this bishop could go to either b7 or, as we'll see in the game, to a6. And the idea here, we can see that the combat, or the main focal point of contest, is this e4 square. So bishop sometimes can go to b7 to help reinforce that e4 square through this diagonal. Okay, white castles, and here black plays bishop to a6. And the idea here is that this white bishop is a good bishop because it's got his pawns are on the dark squares, and this black bishop, instead of playing up to b7, which is actually, I think, is also a fine move and played in a lot of other variations, instead the idea is to exchange it off. Okay, and white is okay with doing that because it slightly displaces this knight, and this knight's going to take a few more moves to get back into the game. So knight takes a6, and now bishop to b2. So here, actually, Botvinnik himself criticized this move, and he suggested that he should play bishop to d3, attacking this knight, which might force something like queen to c8. And we'll see that this positioning of the queen is a lot more passive than the one that black takes in the game. But bishop to b2, in any case, I don't think is a bad move. Queen to d7. So here, this was a very strong move, was praised by Botvinnik as well as other commentators. And the idea here is that idea we mentioned before with queen to d3 now can be met with queen to a4. So we can see here, black's idea is to mainly attack the weaknesses here on the queen side, and he's got more space on the queen side as well as more firepower over here. And so the idea behind queen to d7 is to prevent or to dissuade queen to d3, which would put the queen on a powerful diagonal, attacking diagonal as well. Well, white prevents that idea with a4. So now that the rook is covering the a4 square, and then rook f to e8. And here black's idea again is this focus on the e4 square and putting pressure on it down this half-open file. You'll notice here with these when masters play in general, and especially masters of this caliber, former world champion and a soon-to-be world champion, that it's like the beauty of it is that this idea, I've got this idea. Well, I'm going to counter you with this idea. Oh, I see what your idea is, and I'm going to counter it with this move. And they're looking far ahead, and their understanding of the game is so deep. So a way for us to start to approach that is to study these games very carefully. So, anyways, let me continue. Now, queen to d3, and attacking this a6 knight, and black plays c4, which on the one hand is it protects the knight and it attacks the queen. Now the queen, of course, is not going to escapes easily, and the idea I think here for Capablanca for black is that he's going to maneuver this knight around and eventually plunk it here on b3, and with that it kind of isolates this a pawn so that he can eventually capture it. It's kind of a long term strategy, but I think that's one of the ideas behind this c4. Sometimes when you have these locked pawns here, you have to be careful of creating this type of position because now it's fixed and there's no dynamic chances of some type of exchanges here with these pawns. In fact, here white's the only one. After he moves his queen out of the way, white's the only one who has a way to break through in the center with e4. Okay, so in a way, black is kind of stating his idea here, or making a line in the sand, because he's no longer going to be threatening or having this tension between c5 and d4. Okay, queen to c2 is played, staying on this diagonal. Knight to b8, and again, I think that Capablanca has kind of this knight maneuver. He had this all in his head already when he played this move, and the idea we'll see is fairly clear. So Botvinnik saw this, I think, and instead of trying to defend it, which he could have, maybe with something like bishop to a3, as or some commenters have noted, and after knight to c6, playing bishop to b4, either offering this exchange of this dark square bishop, which isn't really doing too much and is blocked in the center, as well as if the knight ever comes to a5, white would be quick to exchange it. But instead, Botvinnik decides to move forward with his own plan. Okay, and we'll see here, what we're seeing here is that this bishop is pointing towards the king side, this knight is working towards the center and the king side, and now he's putting this rook here on this e file. The idea, it's very clear he's going to be pushing this e4 pawn at some point, and he's ignoring the fact that this pawn is going to come under attack in a few moves. And sometimes when we have ideas and we see our opponent's ideas, we have to make a decision whether we want to work towards preventing their ideas or coming in with our own plans and hoping that our plans are more powerful or hit faster than our opponents. And so we have an example of this here. Okay, knight to c6, continuing on. Knight to g3, again with the plan of supporting this e4 push. Knight to a5 and f3. So here we are planning for e4. Knight to b3. So this blocks the queen off from the view of the a4 pawn. And here again, we are, Botvinnik has made his choice. Okay, he's going all in the center here with e4. Okay, queen takes a4, and here we see that both sides have achieved their strategic purposes. Okay, white has pushed his e4 pawn, and he's going to break through in the center or advance in the center, and black has won a pawn. So black's idea is more of a long-term idea that as long as if we could simplify this position, he'll be a pawn up. And as we know, Capablanca was one of the best ever at the end game, and definitely can win typically with a pawn advantage. So white continues on with e5. Okay, and so he's going to be pushing this knight back. The knight goes back to d7, and white plays queen to f2. So here, the obvious idea is that it is supporting this f4, f5 advance, but there's also just a little tactical nuance. For example, let's go back here, if white were to play f4 right away, then black has a nifty little tactic here, knight b to c5, okay, attacking this queen with this discovery. Of course, if queen exchange, and this knight is hitting this bishop, and a lot of the attacking power of white has been diminished because of that exchange of queens. So that is one of so that queen to f2, part of that was avoiding that maneuver as well. Okay, black plays g6, and the idea here is that he is going to meet f4 with f5. Okay, Capablanca, I think he reasons, again, he was a very strong endgame player, one of the best ever, and he was also a master of simplified positions. So once a few of the pieces are exchanged, he was almost unstoppable. And so he wagers here, I think, that if this e-file opens, which we'll see in the game, that the ensuing exchanges will give him an advantage because he is up a pawn at this point. Okay, well, white continues on with his plan, f4, and black plays f5. Now, white has an opportunity to take en passant, and it's almost forced here if he wants to continue on with this attack. If he decides to play something else, and let me just give you an example. Let's just say he plays f3 to attack this pawn. Well, black can defend it, and then let's say he just plays another move. Well, he would have to maybe bring it back to f2 because of this threatened fork on d2. Then black can play knight to f8 with the idea of blockading the position here on e6. And it would be very difficult, I think, for white to continue on with an attack. So he has to take en passant here, and he does. So let's put that in there. E takes f6. Now this e file is open, and knight takes f6. White pushes on with f5. Again, he's trying to break through here. And rook takes e1. Rook takes e1 and rook to e8. And again, the idea is that if we can exchange some pieces, then white's attacking force is diminished. However, white plays an awesome move here. Rook to e6. Now, rook takes e8 check, queen takes e8 would be a mistake because now this queen comes back to defend. And if f takes g6, queen takes g6, and black is a pawn ahead. He's got this outside pass pawn, and he's threatening a check here on b8, for example. So things are not would not be great for white in this case. If white were to take f takes g6, h takes g6, rook takes e8 check, knight takes e8, and again, everything is just fine. White, with his remaining pieces, doesn't have much of an attack, and this would be fine for black as well. Okay, but he plays e6 in this position. It is threatening this knight. Let's take a look before we look at what was played in the game. If black were to just try to defend this knight, then white has some nice tactics here. With rook takes f6 check, sacrificing the exchange. King takes f6. F takes g6, discovered check. And then king takes g6. Queen to f5 check. King to g7. Knight to h5 check. So here, king to h6 is necessary because if he plays something like king to g8, then we simply have a checkmate in 2 with something like this. Or if he goes to h8, again, a mate in 2. So he has to play king to h6. And then after g4, reinforcing this knight and now threatening checkmate here, black needs to defend with queen to c6. And then bishop to a3 is the move. And the idea here would be to win the exchange back here with bishop to f8 check. And so we can see here that defending with king to f7 back here would not be as good. Okay, let's look at a couple other alternatives. Let's say black, if you were to play knight to e4, just trying to exchange some pieces off, then knight takes e4, d takes e4, and then the move here is f takes g6. Now obviously it looks like white is losing this rook, but then we would have mate in 2 with queen to f7 check, king to h8, and queen takes h7 mate. Okay, again going back, if knight to g4, just trying to attack the queen, then queen to e2, again, is just very dangerous, attacking this rook, and now doubling up on the e-file against the rook here. That would be winning as well. So let's go back. Black didn't play any of those. He is Capablanca after all. He played rook takes e6. And now f takes e6 gives white a powerful pass pawn. King to g7, protecting the knight. Now queen to f4. Okay, and here the idea is to invade via c7. Queen to e8, protecting and bringing that queen back on defense. Queen to e5. So it's pinning the knight as well as protecting this pawn, and eventually we want to push this pawn. Queen to e7. The idea here is to blockade this. And now here, white plays a beautiful move. If you want, pause it and see if you can find the move. Here, Botvinnik plays the beautiful bishop to a3, attacking this queen. After queen takes a3, he plays another beautiful move. If you found this when a couple moves ago, then you may be a grandmaster. Okay, he plays, or you may have studied this game before. Okay, he plays knight to h5 check. And the idea, of course, is that he's going to win this knight if the king moves. And after g takes h5, he's opened the g-file now for a combination. Queen to g5 check, king to f8. By the way, king to h8 after queen to f6 check, king to g8, e7 just transposes back to the game. So let's go back here. King to f8, queen takes f6 check, king to g8, and now e7. So we're threatening checkmate here with e8 equals rook or queen with checkmate. And here, let's go back here real quick to that knight sacrifice. When he played knight to h5 check, he had to see all of this up to e7 threatening mate. And then what he also had to check here, or what he had to see here, was the ability to avoid getting his own king in perpetual check. Okay, so quite amazing that he had to see this far, but that's what he had to do before he sacrificed this knight to make sure that it was sound. Okay, let's go back to the game here. e7, and now we see black's only hope is to try to get white in perpetual check. So he starts off with queen to c1 check, king to f2, queen to c2 check, king to g3, and again, Botvinnik must have seen this ahead of time. Queen to d3 check, king to h4, queen to e4 check, king takes h5, queen to e2 check, king to h4, and then queen to e4 check. And here's the key move, g4, which is going to block this rank as well as this diagonal. Queen to e1 check, and then finally king to h5. We can see there's no safe checks for black to make, and so black resigned. So I just wanted to review a couple key points in the game before we finish this video. The first one is here, and this is on move 15. Black had just played knight to b8, and white makes the decision to play rook a to e1. Okay, and basically this is going all in with this central push as well as a kingside attack. And again, he is essentially sacrificing this a pawn, as we saw in the game. And this is the concept of deciding whether your idea or your plan is more effective than your opponent's plan. Okay, because if you when you're playing your game of chess and you see that your opponent has a big attack or he's trying to win some material, you can either ignore it and carry on with your plans if you think your plan is going to be either faster or have a bigger positive effect for your position, or you're going to have to try to prevent your opponent's plan. Of course, there are some ideas where you can do both at the same time, but it's a key concept in chess. Chess is about decision making, and these are part of those decisions. And we can see how Botvinnik made his decision because of what he felt was better chances with the kingside and central attack. The next position I want to review is right here, and white. A lot of times, at least in my games, and I've seen in other players' games, we might just automatically exchange this piece off. And that of course would be a mistake and would let black get back into the game. But instead, white plays rook to e6, basically forcing black to exchange here. In return, white gains this powerful passed pawn, as we see in the game, ends up winning the game for white, or at least black resigns before it can win the game for white. So whenever you are faced with this tension on files, you want to see whether or not exchanging is the best idea, or whether you should let your opponent do the exchanging so that you can get some compensation for it. And this final position is that double piece sacrifice. And of course the tactics behind it are beautiful, but the part that I want to review with you here is the fact that white needs to calculate the fact that he can get out of perpetual check, because he has a lot of initiative here, and if he's going to sacrifice both his bishop and his knight, he has to make sure he's going to win this game. Now, if he were actually losing this game, or felt that he couldn't win this game, then maybe forcing his opponent into a perpetual would be that. But in this case, he actually saw that he could win it by avoiding perpetual check. So the lesson here, I think, is to make sure that we are calculating far enough when we are thinking about these speculative sacrifices. Now, sometimes if you're playing blitz or you're trying to have fun, you might want to do it in any case. But you want to make sure, if it's a serious tournament game, sometimes the right moves are to make these sacrifices, and you just need to make sure you look far enough ahead to make sure that they're sound. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please press the like button. And if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and get future updates. It's my goal to share with you videos of instructive games, as well as ideas for training and other things that I think will help you become a better chess player. And if you are looking for that type of thing, you might enjoy this channel. So I hope to see you soon, and have a great day.